.357 Magnum, jacketed hollow point versus semi-jacketed hollow point. So these bullets were sent over to the channel by one of my Patreon supporters, Hillbilly Scholar. So thank you for sending these bullets. And I thought it would be kind of interesting to look at how, you know, a modern jacketed hollow point like a Hornady XTP would compare to a classic semi-jacketed hollow point. And these happen to be Zero brand bullets. So both of these are 125 grain bullets, and they're using the exact same powder charge and primers and all of that. So I'm using Hodgdon H110, same as Winchester 296. Got 21.3 grains of powder in there, and I seated these bullets to the same depth inside the case. So the overall length of the semi-jacketed is slightly shorter, but the same internal seating depth. So this should be very interesting because we should have similar velocities, and we should see, you know, what we're getting here between a standard traditional, you know, jacketed hollow point versus the old school semi-jacketed hollow point. So what we're really trying to get is around 1450 feet per second through a 4-inch barrel. So I'm going to use my 4-inch barrel Smith & Wesson 686 to do this test and just kind of see what we get. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistics gel test. So I'm going to go into plain 10% clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those cartridges are. No denim in the way to clog a hollow point or anything like that. Then I'll move on to doing a real world simulation test where I'm going to have 4 layers of denim on this first 3-inch piece that represents our pectoral muscle. After that, we're going to have a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard right here to represent hitting ribs or sternum. 16 more inches of clear ballistics. Then another 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard at the back to represent hitting back ribs. So clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of the density of real flesh. So 3 inches and 16 inches is more like 1.5 inches and 8 inches in a real target. So we're really trying to simulate a 9.5 inch target with ribs in there. So we'll do a plain clear ballistics shot, then a real world simulation shot, and then I will shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these, see if there's a big difference in those bullet styles. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our Hornady XTP 125 grain over 21.3 grains of Hodgdon H110 CCI 550 Magnum primer. So I'm about 7.5 yards from that target. I'm going to go single action with these because, you know, I have to stay kind of far back with loads like this, or the flash will kind of skew that ability for that chronograph to read. So let's see what we get with our 125 grain XTPs here. .1449, that's pretty close to that 1450 I'm going for. .1388. .1377. 1396. 1464. 1499. So definitely not consistent for, you know, what I'm looking to get. I wanted a little bit more consistency. Now we'll have the same load. These bullets are seated, you know, the same depth in the case with our semi-jacketed Zero brand bullets. Same 21.3 grains of each 110. Let's see how these do. .1370. I'll read. 1380. 1390. No read. 1367. So these were a little bit more consistent. I don't know why, but at the same time a little bit less powerful, which is kind of interesting here. So, you know, sometimes that can happen with just the different designs of the bullets. Case ejection with all these is fine. So let's do our ballistics gel block and see how these bullet styles compare to each other. All right, we'll do our plain clear ballistics shot. No denim in the way to possibly clog a hollow point. No rib simulation in the way to slow down its potential for penetration. So first up, we have our XTP bullet. See how this does. All right, set that with our semi-jacketed hollow point. We'll take a look. All right, so a little bit of difference there. And to be honest here, I'm really impressed with both of these, of what I'm seeing here. So our XTP on the bottom, we actually had a lot of fragmenting pieces of lead come off. That's where with the semi-jacketed, we actually did not, which is pretty interesting. It does look like we lost pieces of that semi-jacket though, once we got into this block a little ways. But our XTP, we have really, really good expansion. We went to about 17 inches and then rolled back a little bit there. As where our semi-jacketed hollow point, we went to about 13 3/4 inches and, you know, just stayed right where it was. So both of those look really good. If I had to call one of these right now, which one I think looks a little better, I'm going to say the XTP, but honestly, both of these look really good. So let's put on our denim, put in our rib simulation, and see how these compare in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of denim followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics that represents pectoral muscle with skin on there. Then a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that's going to represent hitting ribs or sternum. 16 more inches of clear ballistics. Then another 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard at the back to represent hitting back ribs. So let's see what we get here with our XTP bullet. Ooh. Let me set that back up and hit it with the semi-jacketed. All right, real world simulation, semi-jacketed at hollow point. Let's see how this does. Let's go take a look. All right, so everything really moved a lot. You might have seen a surprised look on my face. This whole gel block moved about 1/3 of an inch, or both gel blocks moved about 1/3 of an inch. So yeah, that took on a lot of force. And that surprised look I had was due to the fact that this went flying up in the air and, you know, fell apart. I've never seen that quite like that before. So our XTP here, our semi-jacketed up here, both look really good. I'm going to say our semi-jacketed looks a little bit better. But both of them did very similar things here. And just like through the plain clear ballistic shot, we had a little bit less penetration with that semi-jacketed. But both of these really do look really good overall. Tons of damage with both. The energy dump actually looks a little bit greater in this first 3 inches with the XTP, which is kind of surprising to me. But again, you know, that semi-jacketed looks nearly as good. A lot more damage here, or I should say a little more damage than the semi-jacketed with the XTP, and we got 16 1/4 inches of penetration. With our semi-jacketed here, we got about 14 to 14 1/4 inches of penetration. So very, very good with both of these. And you got to understand that semi-jacketed there was that classic round that's recorded as 96% one-shot stop. So yeah, it's got a lot of stopping power, but it looks like when you put an XTP going that fast, it does look like it continues to do pretty much the same thing. So I would have to say that I would guess that the XTP is going to perform as well for stopping a threat as that old school semi-jacketed, but just going a little bit deeper. And it would obviously go through hard barriers just a little bit better, I think, than the semi-jacketed. So both of these look really, really good. So I can't say one's, you know, better than the other by a lot, but I'm going to say the XTP looks a little bit better here. But honestly, both of these are really, really performing quite well. So let's pull these out of the block. I'll take a close-up look at them, then I'll shoot our steel, see what kind of practical shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel, our XTP right here. And here is our 0 bullet semi-jacketed hollow point. So, you know, we had some busted pieces of that skirt come off, that hollow point, which expands out with our 0 bullet, but overall, really good expansion. You know, it held together quite well. So that's a pretty hard lead alloy, and it's, you know, holding together at those type of velocities, which is really good. Now when we look at our XTP here, we have some very good consistent expansion. But if I'm going to look at these here, I haven't measured these yet, I'm going to say that 0 bullet's bigger. So I'm going to show something here with the real world simulation. Big difference here. Here's our 0 bullet. And here is our XTP. So our XTP, it stayed consistent going through our real world simulation compared to, you know, the plain gel shot. I like that consistency. But if we look at our 0 bullet semi-jacketed hollow point, that thing is absolutely massive. So I'm going to say here, I think that 0 bullet overall did a lot better. And you're going to hear me contradict myself because I do this close-up, you know, filming with these bullets after I finish shooting and whatnot. And when I'm shooting and I finish up my video normally, you know, I've only seen the bullets in the block. I haven't taken them out yet. And I'm going to say in a few minutes here that I think the XTP did better overall. But looking from here, I'm going to say the 0 bullets did a lot better. So, yep, I'm going to contradict myself because I hadn't seen these up close yet. That is a significant difference. And one might say, well, it did the same amount of damage in that gel, and that may be true. But at the end of the day, if you're getting about the same damage and one bullet's bigger, that bigger bullet has more chance of clipping something vital. So that did absolutely fantastic, that 0 bullet. It wasn't as consistent going through plain gel, but who cares about plain gel? I mean, I care about the real world simulation because there are always bones and fabric in the way. That's not to say this didn't do good. This did very good. This XTP did very good. But this did a little bit better in my opinion. So very nice looking bullets overall. So that's a close-up look at those. All right, 14 yards from the target. So I'm just going to get a front sight picture and pop these off as fast as I think I can hit the target with both of these loads. I don't think at this range there'll be really any difference here, but I like to do it anyway. So XTP loads. Let's see what this does. 14 yards. Those hit really hard. I did pull one. Semi-jacketed. I don't think anybody would want to be that guy. That hits really hard. So let me back it up and see how these continue to shoot from some distance. All right, 75 yards from the target. So I always like to come back this far for a challenge and just kind of see if there's any differences that I can tell. And sometimes distance can show you a little bit of stuff that you might not see up close. So I'm suspecting that the XTPs could be more accurate at this distance just because, you know, the nose of that bullet is fully, you know, jacketed all the way up around the nose. So there's not really going to be any deformation of that bullet, as we're obviously with the semi-jacketed nose, you could have some deformation just from seating those bullets or from, you know, traveling with them and whatnot, just settling. So we'll see if there's a difference here. So first up we have our XTPs, 75 yards. See how these things do for me. All right, so I had this problem with some other loads I did with these exact same primers. I'm getting, you know, dead primers, and it's not my guns because I have the, you know, everything's set to hit really hard. So it's just these primers are a little bit hard for some reason. Very hard primers. So I'm gonna have to go single action to get a strike on that one. So they're pretty much hitting point of aim for me. Yep, same thing. And I can tell it's a primer because there's barely a little dimple in that, and these will hit normal primers really hard and leave a huge mark in there. So keep going. So not too bad overall. I went single action with the rest of those just because, you know, if you're having problems with the primers being hit hard enough, if you go single action, you'll get a little bit more force on that hammer. So now we'll see how our semi-jacketed do. So I hit more times with this, but I can't say that they're more accurate because I do see impacts that are shifted quite a bit from where I was aiming. And with the XTP bullets, you know, a lot of that's going to be me. That first shot I missed was me completely because I'm just flinching a little bit. Because going between that Ruger I just got and this, I always forget, you know, how light this trigger press is. So I do flinch just a little bit with this. So overall, though, I'm going to say these are pretty good. But from what I'm seeing here, the semi-jacketed was a little bit more consistent overall for me. So the seating depth I got with these XTPs is 1.585 overall, and with the semi-jacketed 1.575 overall. So just a little bit shorter because the actual bullet nose is shrunk down a little bit, and you have to go just that little bit more in, you know, overall length just to get in the case exactly the same depth. So I'm gonna say these are pretty good, and this is one of the first times I've ever worked with H110. So, you know, I messed with it before when I was, you know, several years ago, and it seemed like it wasn't consistent for me. But what I think the problem was I went under the minimum charge, and this has a charge showing between 21 and 22 grains. You're not to go below that, and you're not to go above that. So a lot of people just do 21.5 grains. So it looks like it's a very sensitive powder for getting these particular velocities. So if I were to do this over again, I would go straight up to 22 grains because I think that would give me that more consistent 1450 feet per second I'm looking for. As we're going down, you know, 7/10 of a grain. I was actually going for 21 grains, but when I weighed my last charge, I'm at 21.3. Sometimes that works out like that. So I would go up a little bit here. These are very, very flashy loads, but it did show me, you know, it is a newer jacketed hollow point like a Hornady as good as the old semi-jacketed. And for the most part, whenever I've done a lot of testing with this XTP bullet, you know, from typical ammo, like let's say Hornady Custom, or Custom don't load it, but the American gunner does load the 125 grain. The Custom is the 158 grain. The 125 grain and a lot of other loads, you know, maybe Fiocchi and other people that use the XTP. A lot of times when I've done this testing, they've done terrible. And when I've done this testing with like maybe Buffalo Bore, I think if I recall right, they go a little bit too deep just because there's that much extra power. But when we're loading them at this 1400 feet per second or so, it seems like the XTP does a lot better than what you would see out of a typical, you know, factory loading. And also it seems like it performs better than what you're going to see out of like a Buffalo Bore or an Underwood. So it looks like this is a perfect bullet for about that 1450 feet per second, the XTP. And I would say it's doing a little bit better than that semi-jacketed bullet. That being said, you know, this is a zero brand semi-jacketed hollow point bullet. It is a little bit harder lead alloy than, let's say, Remington or Federal. So it does hold together a little bit better. And I'm not sure if that would take away from the stopping power, you know, not getting as much fragmentation. But I'm going to say, you know, both of these did really, really well. But I'm going to say that I think the XTP at this velocity is a little bit better. So thank you to Hillbilly Scholar for sending these bullets for testing. He kind of sent them and said, you know, do whatever you want with them. Had a couple ideas, and this idea just kind of came up. I'm like, that would be kind of interesting to see if there's a big difference between these semi-jacketed and these XTPs, and now we can see. So again, thank you to Hillbilly Scholar, and thanks for watching.